Hey everyone, welcome back to When Creatives Thrive, a BOPA podcast. I'm Stuart Rustin, the multimedia manager at BOPA, and on this episode, we're featuring Camila Leão. Camila is a Baltimore-based multimedia artist working across illustration, murals, public art, and fine art. Originally from Brazil, she grew up between the fast-paced urban energy of the city and the raw, untamed beauty of the coast. And recently, during Project Urban Oasis, she was able to bring this duality to life in the form of a mural. Her deep appreciation for nature and her comfort in urban spaces was realized through fun, cartoony interpretations of both Brazilian and Maryland wildlife. We also chat about Camila's fine art featured during Artscape at the Scout Art Fair. Scout highlighted more than 40 local artists who convened for a one-of-a-kind showcase of the city's creative talent. Baltimore Magazine, which recently featured Scout as the best exhibition of 2025, described the event as a multidisciplinary mecca that became the festival's nexus. Camila also discusses what it was like to mingle with the Artscape attendees while they browsed through Scout's affordable selection, the confidence she built as she received feedback from locals, and the way Artscape ultimately reminded her of home. Hey Camila, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Stuart, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Exciting.
So first, I'd just like to chat a little bit about your background. I'd love to hear more about what it was like to grow up in Brazil, what that experience was like, and yeah, take it away.
Sure. So I grew up in São Paulo. That is a giant megalopolis. There's concrete as far as your eye can see. And it was funny, when I was about 7 years old, my parents had a house by the coast. So I grew up in these two completely different scenarios, the calm of the beach that we would go every weekend, and also the city, all the things happening. If you could relate São Paulo to any other city in the U.S., I would say it's completely like New York, the same vibe. Yeah. It's chaotic. There's a lot of things going on. It's great. But, it's just a lot of concrete, a lot of gray, but also a lot of public art, So it's amazing. But I grew up between these two scenarios, the nature that is very beautiful and calm and very rustic, and the city and that energy. So, yeah.
And I was doing a little bit of research on my own, looking through your Instagram, and it appears that your mom actually has a textile shop down there.
Yeah.
So was creativity something that was introduced to you at an early age?
Yeah, for sure. She used to have this shop. She retired now, but that was like my first job working with her. When I grew up, she had completely different jobs. She came from the tech area. She graduated in electrical engineering. So, wow. Yeah. And then after she got pregnant of me and, after my brother, she lost her job. So she had to kind of start all over again. And then that's the field that she chose. She was a technician for computer. And then later on, she's like, no, I kind of want to settle. I'm going to start this shop. And it was like a textile shop, and that's where I started working, and just had this amazing things that she had all sorts of products that were handmade by crafters from other parts of the country, and also just art there in the textiles for your home. It could be bedding goods, also kitchen textiles, all sort of things, and I think that was a great way of me seeing art in a different context, for your home or products. I was always fascinated by that, how you can use patterns and, things that are culturally rooted in, things done by hands, by these crafters. A lot of hammocks that were really cool.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so all handmade, So I always loved that sort of thing, the handmade aspect of it. People crafting things through their hands, and you could sell it anywhere in the country.
Yeah, it must have been really interesting to grow up in an environment like that where a creative lifestyle appears sustainable. Do you feel as though that's kind of followed you into your current work today?
Oh, for sure. I always saw my mom, kind of, going from career to something completely different that felt more creative, that she had more contact with that because it was also part of her passion. And also, as a teenager, I grew up in the punk scene, hardcore scene community. And that was also huge for me to experience this, DIY ethos. You can do anything. You can make your art. I started, just by seeing people doing that, the community, that was creative, doing their own things. I kind of bring that to my art nowadays. I started making my own fanzines. I started making art for other bands, for my own bands. So that was always the thing, you can do it yourself. You can get any art, it doesn't need to be great. It's just got to be out there. You just got to, do what you feel like you're loving. And I think that I try to bring that energy to my work nowadays, that I do this professionally.
I'm curious what led you to an interest in moving to the U.S. How did you come upon Baltimore? Like, how did you know that was the best next step?
Right. So it was all because of music. I had I had a band, and that's how I met my partner. He also had a band. He's from the U.S., and we kind of, we met each other in Brazil. He moved to Brazil, lived there for 2 years, and then his work required him to come to the U.S. to work in the office. And that's when we realized, okay, we're going to move. And I was really, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was a graphic designer. I graduated in graphic design in 2013. But I tended to not work with graphic design. I always loved manual arts, crafts, paintings. So I was always kind of like being dragged to the arts, And when I moved to the U.S., it was this big shift because he's not in the art scene at all. He works for a nonprofit. He's more like admin work, even though he's a musician. But it was funny because I was like, I had no idea how I'm going to build that up. In Brazil, I had my artistic community. I had the people, the whole thing, the support. And when I moved, it was just this big shift, and I didn't know how I would, follow my art, and how would it look like, and how the community would look. So in the first years in the U.S., I didn't work with any creative work at all. I was just doing it on the side. But actually, thinking about it, it was just a great way for me. It was a great thing that happened to me because I had time to really focus on my craft and study and deep on that on the side, and kind of like reshape how I wanted my art to look like. Because, as artists, I feel like we always have this need of change, but at the same time, like, you don't want to create a formula and do that for the rest of your life, right? That doesn't feel completely fulfilling. So I think change is good. And when I got to that point that I wasn't working with anything creative, and I was like, no, I really got to focus and kind of, get my game going. And I started to just research and do a lot of work. And at that point, I was working for a tattoo shop as a counter person. Wasn't creative at all. I was just dealing with clients, but I was surrounded by art. And I always loved tattoo art as well. But just the people around there, I saw all these tattoo artists working on their iPads. And I was like, that's really amazing. I don't have an iPad. I should get one and start drawing on an iPad. And that was like a total, different thing for me. And I feel like that's when my illustration approach started to improve. I completely focused on that. Just doing illustrations every day, drawing, researching, kind of bringing all this things that I loved, folk art with, the things that I could show to a different community that I haven't, showed yet. So, what can I bring from my background and from what I love, and all those things, this music aspect, just the Brazilian identity that I have in me and always had in my art with the punk. How can I kind of just combine all those things and, bring it here? So that was really amazing. So I started doing a lot of things on the side, and then I got a job that wasn't creative at all, but it was also surrounded by creativity. I worked for a stock image company. So I was dealing with a lot of illustrations and vectors and that kind of thing. So after 3 years, I, just doing things on the side, my own art, my own clients, that's when I had that moment that okay, I can do this, 100%. I really want to work with my art, and I should try. I should take that leap of faith and see how it's going to go. And that's where I am now, a little over a year, doing this by myself now, just completely working with my own art for myself.
So that actually brings me to Project Urban Oasis, which was something that you were involved with. And it was like this revitalization of the space right under the JFX. It was like all of the pillars were being repainted. And how were you able to integrate some of the things that we've talked about, your upbringing and your culture and infuse that into the local community?
So that was a great thing because, Urban Oasis. So, the expectation was to have this sort of immersive nature, like a nature aspect to it, but that also felt urban. We're in the city, and I couldn't feel that this reflected my art more, because I love nature and I grew up between these two,
right.
Colliding worlds. And I think that was just like, really what I love to do, drawing nature. That's what I do to my art. I love to represent animals. And even though I paint Brazilian animals, I'm here. I love depicting the animals here and learning more about the nature that I'm surrounded by, that I'm experiencing. So I try to just use the Maryland nature, the Maryland elements, fauna and flora, but also bring that Brazilian vibrancy that with, some patterns. So it was actually funny because for Urban Oasis, when I saw the shape of the pillar, and I think that's a really cool thing about murals, that you can kind of wrap your art around it. So it, no matter what is the shape of the mural, you can kind of create around it. And I kind of think that my illustrator, my graphic designer brain kind of works in this way that I see things as series or grids. And when I saw the shape of the pillar, this octagonal, like straight panels, and I was like, this is really cool. I can kind of work with that too, even though I want to have like a urban and a nature organic view to it. I also want to make like this cool grid that would have like a folk aspect. So I try to depict my animals. I work with illustrations, so it's not realistic. I like creating animals my own way, even though they're real animals. They're all real elements from the nature. I like doing it in a specific way. So I try to go with that folk aspect, but bringing the vibrancy of Brazil and the elements from Maryland.
Yeah, the colors are super bold. And you're right, just because of the nature of those octagonal pillars, there's sort of like lines built into it already. So it feels like there's a little bit of structure, but there's also kind of a playfulness, I would say, with your work. Like it's approachable and it's kind of feel good. Like when you see it, it draws you in. Like, is that part of the approach as well, or something you're thinking about while you're designing or painting, or is that in some way a reflection of you as a person?
Yeah, for sure. I want to create things that, are enjoyable. I want people to experience happiness when they're looking at my art, not only through the colors, but through the shapes and how I see the world too, So these illustrations that I do is the way I see things. My own way of creating the animals that I look at that are not the realistic versions of them is my own version. And I think it's just a fun way of looking at things, and presenting that to the world and in a way that people can experience.
It seemed like Project Urban Oasis was sort of a unique process in that there were a lot of muralists working simultaneously just based on the scope of work and that there were so many pillars that needed to be done in time for Artscape. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like working alongside your fellow artists as opposed to maybe what ends up being a little bit more of like an isolating experience if you're commissioned to do a mural on your own?
Yes, it was a great experience. Honestly, it was the best experience I had painting murals in Baltimore. There were a lot of artists that I've seen their work everywhere and I never met them in person. So, I had that aspect of meeting these people, seeing their painting, and also just connecting with the mural scene. I feel like the mural scene was so welcoming to me when I moved here. And I feel like the work that I do for murals is it's a product of Baltimore. I started doing it in Baltimore. I didn't paint murals in Brazil. That's kind of like a recent thing that I started doing. So it was just a great, amazing experience meeting everybody and, seeing these murals starting either before me or after me, and then seeing their completion and just having that camaraderie. Everybody was there supporting each other. We were exchanging a lot of things and just talking about the area and, opportunities and how amazing it was. It felt great. I loved meeting everybody, the people that I admired and the people that I already knew that were my friends. So it was amazing.
I wonder, have you had a chance to take any of the personal growth, like the artistic growth that's happened here over the past, few years back home to sort of share what you've been doing in Baltimore with people from home?
Yes, I painted some murals in Brazil as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but I kind of want to, because I feel like I'm a very fluid person. I'm here and I call Baltimore my home now, but I don't know what's going to be in a year or two where I'm going to be. I might go back to Brazil, and I want to go back at some point. So definitely, I feel like, what I brought from Brazil here, I also want to bring what I have here to Brazil, so people there can experience something different too and kind of see how is my experience here. And honestly, I have so many Brazilian friends that support what I do here, and they're like, wow, this is amazing, all the public art and the murals that you're painting, and they see that, and I hope I can bring a little bit of Baltimore. I always speak highly of Baltimore, and I hope, because a lot of people don't know Baltimore. When I moved here, they're like, oh, okay, the city from, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the...
Probably The Wire.
The Wire, yeah. Oh my gosh, the city of The Wire. And I'm like, yes, but there's so much more to it, and I can really relate Baltimore to home. There's this DIY aspect to it, this kind of energetic feel. The art community is amazing. So that's something that I can really relate to São Paulo.
The next thing I wanted to talk about is the Scout Art Fair, because you were there. I saw you there. I know you were there. Yeah. So this was the affordable art fair that was curated by Derrick Adams and Teri Henderson. Artists who were there were also tasked with talking to the public, the Artscape goers.
Yeah.
You're also there sort of on display with the art too, in a sort of strange way, right?
Right. It was really interesting. I was kind of nervous about this aspect of, an art show, that you have to be there in your booth and talk about your art. I didn't really know what to expect and what would be the attendance. And in the end, it was just great. I kind of took that opportunity. Okay, I have my booth. I'm bringing some of my work that were part of my solo art show and also some other older work. And as a muralist, there was this blank wall, and they said, you guys can do whatever you want with your booth. And so I took that opportunity. I also painted the walls. I wanted to give that kind of immersive feel. And, just being at Scout was really great. People would walk, and then they would look at my booth and all the bright colors. They would start dancing, that kind of thing. And it was so recepted well. So I think it flowed really naturally, talking to people, interacting with people, and also I didn't feel like a salesperson, and I was afraid of that because I'm a terrible salesperson, by the way.
I don't believe that. First of all, I don't believe that.
But, it just felt so natural. People would, they were just curious about what my art was, and they would look at it, and they were like, where are you from? I can tell your art is not, you're not from here. So that was really, really interesting. So it was very engaging, and in a way, I felt confident after that. I didn't know what to expect. I haven't been to a lot of, being part of a lot of art shows in Baltimore. So I feel like that was a great way of seeing how people experienced my art, how they connected with it. And there were a lot of talks, people kind of giving me feedback of what they felt of my art. So that was really great input. And, the attendance, the vibes, I think everything was really great. Also knowing some other artists that I admired, and in general connect with, other galleries and the artist, the whole thing. I think it was amazing.
You know, what struck me walking through Scout was just how different all of the art was.
Right.
And although that's obvious when you're looking at it, it took me a little while, like talking to some of the other artists that were there, to recognize that sometimes that's not the experience in a gallery space, where sometimes it can sort of feel homogenized, like one sort of look throughout the whole thing or one feel. But this felt very Baltimore in a way that everybody kind of had their own point of view and was bringing something different to the table.
Right. You know, I by seeing the art community and the fine art of Baltimore, I felt like I didn't really fit in, you know, before this. And after Scout, the reception that I had and just being there, talking to people, connecting and kind of having this feedback, I felt way more confident on following, you know, my fine art, because I feel like I'm an artist that works with all these different aspects like murals, fine art, illustrations. Illustration is my main thing, you know, but also graphic design. So when I saw my paintings there and people going over that and experiencing it, it felt really great. And I think the curators did a great job, because, you know, the way that they put people, and as the audience was walking and going by, you could, you know, they were experiencing different things. So the arts that were very different from each other were next to each other. And I think that was a really great thing to, you know, to set up. So I think they did a great job.
I assume that an experience like that guides you in a different direction or potentially changes your momentum in a certain kind of way. Like, are you thinking towards the future now because of that experience with different goals in mind?
I want to connect more with that side of my work, the fine art aspect of it, and do more and paint more, because I love doing it. But also, like, I feel, you know, my work could be on other environments, other galleries, you know. So I definitely feel more confident in that way, in my fine art aspect of my work, for sure.
Do you think that the subject matter starts to evolve as well? Like, maybe the style stays consistent, but are you thinking about either new topics, like new messaging, anything new coming up?
Yeah, definitely. I think just being there and seeing other people's works, you know, your mind kind of keeps going, and you see all these references. And also, I definitely want to change. Like I said earlier, I don't want to feel like I have a good formula. You know, oh, okay, this particular style or thing is selling, so I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life. I don't want to do that. I want to keep, you know, changing and moving, and whatever is that, you know, is that I'm experiencing at that time, I want to keep representing that and kind of, you know, putting all these experiences I have into my work and kind of represent that moment too.
For sure. Well, that's kind of an easy thing, right? To sort of stick with what's working instead of challenging yourself to maybe take a little bit of a risk, right? Especially when you're out there on your own and you're an independent artist in this sort of DIY mentality that you're talking about. Like, I'm sure that can maybe cause some anxiety.
Yeah.
But hopefully there's an energy behind it, right? It sounds like you've got that energy.
For sure. You know, as we were talking, I just remembered this. It was really funny because I had my most recent work displayed and I had some older work displayed. And people loved the older work. And I was like, wow, I kind of moved on, you know?
Right.
Like, out of that.
That's not me anymore.
Yeah, that's not me anymore, even though I loved that. And, you know, I was, that just made me think that if that type of work was displayed on, you know, something like Scout before, maybe that would have changed the course of my work. You know, maybe I could have created something different that it's not what I'm creating now. So I think that is funny. You know, it's not only what you create, but also the environment around it. You know, where you display, how it's received. So I think Scout really gave me like a different insight about my work as well, because the things that were older were much better received than the newer paintings. But it was great in both ways, but now I can see how people like want art for their homes, you know, by talking to them. And, you know, the other ones had this, I would say, more like cultural aspect to it because they were very, you know, way more tropical in nature. So I think maybe that's, you know, people loved about my work here. And it was just funny. It was, kind of mind-blowing in a way, in a great way, because I love having this feedback and seeing how people see my art as well.
Having something like Scout, I think, pushes everybody forward. It's challenging, I know, from like a logistical standpoint, but also once that stage was set, then it allows everybody to kind of level up a little bit. For sure. Were you able to, at any point, just enjoy Artscape? Were you able to get out and, try the flavor lab or, see the artisan market? Like, were you able to kind of experience in a quote unquote sort of normal way?
Yeah, I had some moments after Scout because there were some days that, ended earlier than the Artscape event. So I definitely went there. I wanted to see, the whole thing and experience Artscape. Because as a person that is not from Baltimore, I wasn't here for years experiencing how Artscape was, right? I just went to the 2 previous editions. So it was really cool. I wanted to see, in a new place, in a different place, with Scout being a new thing. So I really wanted to go out there and see what else was going on, the other artists that were vending, that were exhibiting outside. So I really wanted to see it all and also, see the stage, even though the music, like I said, I like more rock, metal, that kind of thing. But it was just a great experience. And just looking at the whole thing, when I stepped outside of Scout and, you're from the top of the stairs looking down and there's that huge stage in front of you, full of people having fun. And that was like amazing. I saw that and I got my phone. I was like, I gotta, record this. This feels amazing. And that felt like São Paulo a lot. We have a cultural event. Yeah. Once a year. It's called Virada Cultural, like cultural turn. And it had the same energy as São Paulo. So that really made me feel like home.
Wow, that's incredible to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you got to take a step outside because, sometimes it's like separating work and pleasure, like just enjoying it is difficult when you're there to do one thing.
Right.
Making sure that you take a little time to breathe is really good. It's been awesome chatting. I want to make sure that you get a chance to tell us a little bit about what's coming up next for you and also where people can see your work and connect with you online.
Sure. So coming up, I have 3 murals that I'm about to paint. Yeah, busy. Yeah, 2 in Towson and 1 in DC. I can give a lot of spoilers because they haven't been promoted yet, but, it's going to be fun. There is one mural festival in the way that, that's going to have that similar energy to the Artscape one. So I'm excited. And where they can find me on, I'm all social media platforms, Instagram mostly. It's my first name, Camila, and then Leão, Leao. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great, and I can't wait for Artscape 2026.
Me too. Thanks so much to Camila for joining the podcast, and thank you for listening. Remember, if you're a creative person with a story to share, reach out to me at srustin@promotionarts.org to be featured on the podcast. And remember, when creatives thrive, we all rise.